Hello everyone, thank you very much for watching this video. My name is Luke Elijah and my esteemed guest with me today is Justin Quek, who is the visionary and innovative CEO of the real estate agency Orange Tea. Thank you so much, Justin, for embracing us with your presence and to share with us your insights.
Pleasure.
Right, you have had a very long and illustrious career in the real estate industry, spending about 2 decades.
Thanks for revealing my age.
But you look great for your age.
Thank you.
So, what would you say would be some of your most memorable highlights in your tenure?
Okay, so yeah, almost 2 decades. I think maybe before going through the journey is about starting. Let's look at the starting point first. So I was quite fortunate to be exposed to real estate very early in life. My father, who is an engineer by profession, was with Singtel, just a regular engineer with Singtel, spent most of his money not buying silly things like cars and stuff like that, but we were very much vested in real estate. So from a very young age, I was exposed to that journey of real estate investment. And I would say originally my interest in real estate always came more from architecture. So when I was younger, I used to love to just travel around, no driving license, right? So on my bicycle. When I'm cycling around, I always like to look at 2 things, cars and houses. So in fact, I always remember certain types of architecture that I really appreciated. And I will not remember the house address, I remember the car plate that's parked in the house. Yeah, so I mean, it was always that whole thing about my love for cars and houses that started me on this journey. And thanks to my folks as well, they were the ones who again exposed me to this. So I shared this before that we have a methodology at Quek family, right? Back in those days where we were reading papers to look at classified ads, right? For some of the viewers who may not know, there was no such thing as like Property Guru or listing platforms back then. Huge newspapers, you had to go through, see through all the listings on the newspaper ads. So I'll be the one highlighting. And then when I highlight, I pass it on to my mother, who's stage 2, who make the call to the agent to find out the address. And then stage 3 will be recycling to the addresses to do a bit of a recce. Then I come back and I tell my parents, yeah, I think this one not bad. This one got drain reserve next door. This one the neighbors have done up, that kind of thing. Orientation.
Natural flair.
Interest. That's why I said, yeah. I think the whole thing about real estate is primarily when people ask, why do you do real estate? Or why do you want to come to real estate? I think your why has to be answered first. Yes. And of course, I mean, it's very easy to be distracted in this day and age with social media and all that, where real estate industry, people think it's just all about the money and all that. But there are really genuinely people, especially in my company. I mean, that's why I'm passionate about running it, because of the people that represent the brand and the company as well. Like a lot of them, they themselves are property investors. That's why I'm sharing this story as well on how I started my real estate journey, right? I was exposed to it from my parents. And then after I got out of university, against my mother's wishes, I decided to come and join this because my university education was in finance, and it was very natural for me to join a bank. But at a point in time, I wanted to just really look at real estate because I was interested in coming to real estate. At that point in time, I had studied finance, and I sort of connected the dots with what my dad was doing as a property investor. Then I realized, wow, this is a space that is not just about architecture, but as a retirement goal, as a plan for building your financial wealth as well. It's very important to know the space even more. I knew it as a consumer, so my next step was to develop myself into going into the space, into the agency space, to be at the marketplace, to see how people transact, how they do deals, and know the business a bit better. So that's where I was coming from. So yeah, memorable in the sense that when I first got in, I came back from school from Australia. I returned my father all my savings, and I said from now on, I'm going to just depend on myself. And I still remember I only had like less than $10,000 in my bank account back then. And I said, I think real estate will be the quickest for me to get into with a little bit of seed capital. I can get into the business. So I started off like most regular agents. I have a bit of pride in the way I do things, so I never wanted to approach my friends and tell, hey, everybody, I'm in real estate. That's always an easy thing to do. But I wanted to start quietly by myself first to see whether I could start the business from scratch. And so the very first thing that, because again I was exposed to landed properties, we looked at old houses, we refurbished them. So I had that lens already and the experience of looking at that business model. So I decided, initially when I started to go after the landed market. So very simply, I just went to Katong Shopping Centre, printed out black and white flyers because I can't afford colour. And that night I just walked around and just started putting flyers in, and got calls. Or one of my programs that I always ran was when I put flyers in, there's a promissory on the flyers to say that I will call you in a week or two. Yeah, so 1-2 weeks later I'll be at the office just doing cold calling. So I really started from the ground up. Again, because I wanted to understand how the business can be run from ground up rather than come in and say, hey, everybody just pass your leads to me and stuff like that. Yeah, so with that I started closing deals, clocking deals with landed properties, and then from landed properties, a lot of landed property owners usually have multiple properties, especially back then when there's no cooling measures or ADSD in place. Yeah, so from there then I started to do some of their investment deals, their private condos in town and stuff like that. So then I expanded my business from landed also into like CCR properties. A lot of them have properties at River Valley and Orchard and stuff like that. Yeah, so I think the memorable moment for me was starting, and then there were a few points of inflection along the way. Another one would be when I started to do projects. So if you look at my experience of where I started, I was doing more what they call secondary market properties, right? Resale properties. So like properties like you and I own, you get an agent to sell it. It's called secondary market. I never wanted to step into a beautiful show flat because I always said if you go in, you're sure going to get spotted, right? Back in those days when you go into show flats, you see like thousands of shoes and slippers there. You go in, it's this marketplace frenzy, everybody's taking out their checkbooks. I say, you go to that situation, you're going to get yourself spotted. So for over a decade of doing the business, I never stepped into that space because of my old belief that, again, you're not going to get a good deal. You're going to pay for something premium to buy brand new when there's so much more value outside of that market, the secondary market. Yeah, but that point of inflection came in 2016 when I came back and I realized, hey, Singapore has been in the lull for the past 6 years thanks to the cooling measures introduced around 2011 to 2013. And then I had this sense that the next uptick in the market would come from the new launches. Just so happened at that point in time, serendipitously as well, my company had an appointment for a site in East Coast, which I'm very familiar with. And again, serendipitously, that site happened to be a site that I had worked on a couple of years before, looking at it with a few developers in wanting to actually build like a retirement model in Singapore. So I was very familiar with the site, company needed help, I jumped into it, having zero experience. And that's when I was firstly exposed to new launches. And that basically had a bit of a trajectory change for me, right? Because being exposed to the game and being my first project, I did rather well there. And then that's when you also get visibility to the market, right? Other agents know you, developers start to know you. And that was a trajectory shift for me because after that, I started to not just do projects, I started to take on projects as leadership, what they call IC, to be in charge of the project. And yeah, so that was a point of inflection for me. That was exciting because I was spending 10 years doing something that I was so familiar with, and then 10 years into the business, jumping into something that I was completely unfamiliar with. But that's my belief these days, right? I think I've shared with you previously that if you don't know how to do something, you're scared of not knowing how to do it also, never done it before, say yes.
Yes, the more you should do it. Absolutely, yeah.
Growth happens when you're out of your comfort zone.
Indeed, well said.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, you're obviously driven by your passion and you had very humble beginnings and you worked from the ground up to where you are today. But if you reflect back on your career, is there anything you have changed? If you could reverse the clock, would you have changed anything?
Yeah, I would have spent a bit less time mucking around outside of real estate. I mean, I went into banking for a while. I also went into restauranting for a while. I had a few minor distractions along the way. The thing about a real estate career is because you're your own boss, so you pretty much have quite a bit of freedom in terms of your time and your finances, right? And obviously, if you do well in this business, the money can come in substantial lump sums. And that makes you itchy sometimes to do things on the side. But I think in life, I've also realized after a while, it's like focus is very important. And of course, when you're younger, you get a bit easily distracted, right? So I think that happened, and I wish I had focused a little bit back more on the business rather than get distracted with all this, what I would call side hustles. money that was supposed to be earned for my very first property, I ended up sinking into a restaurant, sustaining a restaurant, which became a failed venture, and I lost all my capital and most important, precious time, right? Because one thing we talk about real estate, we talk about investment, all that. If there's one thing that you can never earn back,
It's time. Absolutely.
Money you can always earn again, right?
Indeed.
Yeah, but time is something you can never earn back, no matter how much money you earn. So yeah, I mean, if I could change it, maybe I would have focused back more on real estate. But having said that, perhaps it is because of those incidents that happened that got me coming back to the business a lot more focused. Sometimes you need to make a few mistakes in your life, then you realize what they are, then you come back stronger. Yeah.
So no big loss actually. In fact, you actually gain from those experiences.
I would like to think so, right? I mean, all of us have stories.
Absolutely, yeah. So where would you say the real estate market is headed to next year, especially with the cooling measures, the new regulations, and the market's being disrupted by AI. So there's a lot of external factors.
Yeah.
So what's your take on it?
Okay, maybe before we look at the granular, we take a step back, right? I mean, people always ask this question, hey, how's the market? When is the right time to buy and stuff like that? In Singapore, we just need to focus on the fundamentals. Now, what are the fundamentals of real estate? Firstly is you need a market with volume. And I always share this with people in Singapore. If you want to understand why Singapore market seems so resilient, right? I always say you remember these three fundamentals. The first one is 90% of us own a home. So which means 90% of us always have a chance to translate what we have into something else. Versus a country, say like Hong Kong or Australia, where the home ownership rates are less than 50%. So each time the property market goes up, 5 out of 10 people in a room will be left behind. Versus Singapore, where 9 out of 10 of us, we say, oh, property is so expensive, but you and I look at each other and say, you own one, I own one. You own one, you own one, right? So as much as we lament about how property prices keep going up, but we are vested. So we all have skin in the game. And each time you say, hey, I'm bored of staying where I am now already, and you go to some swanky show flat, and you say, wow, this looks really nice. I can see myself going there. And you're immediately able to then translate what you have into the next property. So 90% of us own a home, so home ownership rates are high. I think that's a very important fundamental to know. So you can translate that money anytime what you have now into something else. So that gives the market that base of volume. Fundamental number two, I would say remember a triangle. In Singapore, about 80% of us, close to 80% of us stay in HDBs. We've got about 16% space that are in private condominiums, and then the last 4% space is people who stay in landed houses. Now, if you read this year in the papers, we are in a record year in 2024 of the number of $1 million HDB flats that are being transacted. The government doesn't like it for very good reason, because this kind of narrative promotes a bit of fear, right, that house affordability is going down. True of the matter is, again, you look back, 9 out of 10 of us own a house, 80% of us stay in HDB flat. If more of us at the base of this triangle have that capacity to translate that equity that has been growing over the last 5 years to the next level up, we're able to have this thing called housing mobility. And when we go up, let's say even 10% of the 80% wants to move up into the next segment, which is only 60%. That's a huge segment moving into a smaller segment. And that's enough to create an uplift or a support for the private condo market. Then same thing, you have to understand, right, who is going to sell you at that 16% space? It's not just developers who are building this, because if you look at our annual supply is not enough to feed the numbers of demand most of the time. So then they have to end up buying from us, people like you and me who already own something, then we sell out. And obviously nobody in Singapore is used to selling things at a loss. In fact, we are all in a very privileged world when we want to make profits. So we sell to these people who are coming up the ladder. Then where do we go? We also want to move up to the ladder. And then the air is even thinner at the top, 4% of the housing supply. And that's why today your landed properties are no longer, you struggle to find something less than 4 million, even for the smallest terrace houses. And then think about it, the people at the 4% who are selling to the people who are going up also have to go somewhere. Like your parents, who were maybe lucky they bought a landed house in the 80s for like barely a few $100,000. Today they are sitting on maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 million. And then when they sell it, they also have to go somewhere. Right? So they sell it to the young generation who's climbing up. But where do they go?
Right size, downsize.
They come down. Yeah. So then again, that supports the two markets that are below that stratosphere. Right? So you see this whole ecosystem going on, right? Where 9 out of 10 of us own something and we are just dancing around the space. So in Singapore, we enjoy that. I mean, social mobility, housing mobility is very high. Right, many other countries, you could sell your barren farmland that your dad left you, but there's no way you can go to a city centre and buy something in a core central region or whatever because the disparity is so high. But for us here, we're able to slowly step up. We're also able to slowly step down or even take a drastic come down on the way. And there's nothing wrong with somebody selling out their private property when they are 65 years old and say, my kids have all moved out, I don't need space anymore. I'll come back down to a HDB flat, maybe one that I'm familiar with nearby, got a Sheng Siong, NTUC downstairs.
All that you need, yeah.
All that you need, right? And in fact, when you grow a bit older, you realize conveniences are more important than anything
Absolutely,
else.
yeah.
Not the brand and all that anymore. So you come down maybe all the way to HDB, and then you're buying it from that young person who's maybe coming up. So you're doing, I call it the great exchange. Right, so that's the second fundamental to realize. Then the third one is Singapore is not a free market. It's a highly regulated market, and the government's mandate is to keep the markets stable, but they also want growth, but sustained growth, not growth that is like that. That's why the measures are here to
gradual.
Exactly. Which works well for all of us. Of course, some investors who like that kind of an up will not be able to get in Singapore anymore. Right? So you have to realize the market is growing slower, but it's more sustained. So that's why it's also very hard for the market to take a tumble because think of it, I always graphically present it as a tap or a water dam. Right? You control the flow. Anytime the flow is too strong, we can
close the faucet or slow it down.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yes.
And also think about it vice versa. If the market slows down a little bit, the government doesn't need to do much, but they simply need to
relax a little bit, and then the demand will rush in again.
Exactly. So it's very hard for things to crash. Like in many other countries, you see this, and then the next moment, you will see this, right? The government doesn't want that. Neither do I as an investor in Singapore. To be honest, Singapore, we're so lucky to be here as a Singaporean. You get to
I agree.
To stay vested here.
Yes.
So just the more important question, coming back to your original question about how do I see the market in 2020. At the end of the day, I just sum it up very simply for people in Singapore, is that if you're Singaporean, you've got a chance to buy here as a Singaporean with minimal tax at your primary residence and so forth, so on and so forth. It's about not timing the market anymore, but really about time in the market, right? Because going back to what I was saying much earlier, when we talked about the first question, so what's the only thing you can never buy that?
Time.
Yeah. So if you're trying to position yourself very nicely, say, I'm waiting for that collapse and then I'm going to rush in. There's probably quite many of you thinking that way as well, right? So you're not going to be the only one rushing in. So you don't want to be in that kind of position, right? And waiting and waiting and waiting. Because every year lost is opportunity cost of being out of the market. So whatever happens in 2025, the idea is if you haven't gotten into the market and maybe you're getting into the market, in Singapore, it's still more important just to simply be invested. All right, so that's the high-level thinking about fundamentally approaching the Singapore market. If we get a bit granular for next year, a few things are happening. There are a lot less HDBs coming into MOP. So that means people reaching their 5 years and then being able to sell out, to come out, to buy the next thing. Which would mean then, looking at the 80% base, you're going to have less HDBs available for sale. Because the market, those that are supposed to come in to add new supply at the end of 5 years, you're going to have less of that next year. So that's going to put some pressure on the HDB resale market. So this year, I believe we have already crossed 1,000 over units of $1 million HDB flats. Recently, the article came out. And I think this trend, unfortunately or fortunately, will set to continue. Unfortunate in the sense that for a young buyer today who's looking to start their housing journey, the resale market is going to be a little bit tough to get into because it's going to continue to perhaps escalate.
Yes.
Having said that, the guys who are selling their HDB are going to be able to sell at that price, which then provides that lift for them to springboard into. Yeah. Right. So you can see there are always two sides to a coin. It's very hard for the government to also be able to control. What they're doing to help the young people, you will see in our most recent BTO exercise, the government has been really ramping up the BTO, the brand new HDBs from HDBs themselves. And between 2021 to 2025, they were promising up to 100,000 units. They've already delivered almost 3/4 of that. So that will set to continue. So that will provide the first timers an opportunity to still get into subsidized housing that is affordable. In fact, very good, high quality housing that's affordable. So I think we've still got a pretty good system in Singapore of making sure everybody has a chance, right? But the thing is, we talked about the base, the HDB, now we look at the private market. Next year, we're going to have a record number of new homes being launched. So if you're looking at the base that's about to come up, there's going to be a good base from being supplemented from the HDB market, who's able to then jump into something, and then they will have choice. Yeah, so that should promote some activity in the new launch market. But then again, if you're looking for a primary residence, you might say, I may not be able to wait for, this house, although it's very beautiful and I see myself living here, but I've got to wait 3 to 4 years for this to be ready. Where am I going to stay in the next 3 to 4 years? Right, most people also don't want to get into the process of renting, especially if you've already spent the last 5 years owning your own HDB flat. So they might end up going into the secondary resale market to buy something that's ready to move in. So you see again, because of this whole housing mobility that I talked about as fundamental in Singapore, everybody has choice, right? So if I don't go buy new launch, but the new launch creates that excitement in the market for me to think about, wow, I need to move on, I need to move out from my current place, creates that aspirational need in you. And ultimately you might say, you know what, I don't think I want to wait 4 years or go and pay rental for 4 years waiting for my new launch. I might just want to buy something that's ready in the market today. Then that will provide reasonable support to the resale market for the private properties in Singapore. So if that happens, then you and I who stay in private properties might be able to say, okay, maybe it's time for me to sell out. And then you make your little bit of money and then you see where you want to go after that again. Right? If you're retiring, maybe you want to come down, or if you still think you've got some energy, you might want to come up, you've got kids, your family's growing. So again, going back to see, looking at the ultimate fundamentals in Singapore, housing mobility is high, right? And because 90% of us are invested, each time we're able to again translate that into something else. So the housing market will be the housing market. I mean, in Singapore, you're not going to get much surprises. As my American clients used to say, boring. But in this day and age,
stable and safe.
Boring is good.
Yeah. Right. What advice would you give to new aspiring real estate agents trying to enter the workforce into this industry? Because the whole when you were in RES and versus now, times are very different, right? You will have a lot of market forces against you. AI is against you. You can't just do staging, form filling, or market research. And in fact, your clients might have perhaps more social media followings than yourself.
Yes.
So what value add can a new agent give?
Very good question. And in fact, this question I think is very important for even all existing RES to really think about, not just the new ones that are coming in, right? In Singapore especially, it's not just technology that is coming in to disrupt. Even at the governmental level as well, policy level as well, right? Like regulated market policies in terms of cooling measures, in terms of now government even investing in infrastructure to form part of marketplaces. So all these things are coming in, and then technology, policy, social media. The customer journey is changing. The consumer is changing. Today, you and I may not go and see an expert right away, but we might do a lot of exploration ourselves first by watching some influencers or maybe opinion leaders, reading articles, watching videos and stuff like that. So you're right, we are, as a customer, let's look at it from the lens of the customer first, right? The customer is really empowered today with lots of data. In fact, data are so democratized today, you and I possibly sometimes even have more data if we are diligent enough to go looking for it. We might actually sometimes even be more empowered with information than even, say, the agent themselves. Because if you, let's say you like this area, you like this development, you're still currently undergoing your MOP, you've still got 2 years ahead. But doesn't mean you're going to wait until the 2 years is finished, then you go look. You are already now looking 2 years ahead of time. And when that time comes 2 years later, when you're free to put yourself into the market to sell your HDB, you're actually all ready, because you might have been looking at this grid and knowing every transaction in this area for the last 2 years. So finally, when you get to sell out, you go to that building that you really, really like and you've been studying for 2 years. So then, let's look at it from the agent's perspective. What is the agent then there to do if the customer has been so greatly empowered with data and information along the way? And we're all getting more educated, we're all well schooled today, so we also have our own methodologies, we have our own thought processes. We may not necessarily have to rely on somebody anymore. So then you've got to really think about what your value proposition as an agent really is. Right? So that's why I think going forward, now running an agency, right, you have to look at how do you then present your value proposition, not just as an agent, but even as an agency, as an organization, right? Why would a customer engage with this organization, right? Truth be told, I'll tell you recently, I met one of the agents also who's been having a hard time, very established agent, seasoned agent, top performer, and was lamenting that the client actually trusted the advice of an online guru that they don't even know but just see on YouTube more than this agent who's been in this business for a decade and very well studied and all that, has a methodology of approaching the market and all that. And the client trusted the YouTube guru more than the agent. Right? So these things, this is reality.
It is indeed.
Yeah. So I mean, as much as a lot of the agents always sell how successful they are in this business,
Yes.
all that, but with the democratization of data, with technology, with social media and all that, a lot of things are now being presented to the market for free. So then what is your value as an agent coming into the
They
equation?
really need to think how they can continue to keep themselves relevant to their
Yes.
clients and customers,
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, let's not make it all sound doom and gloom.
Mm-hmm.
My cousin runs one of the largest travel agencies in Singapore. And I always look at their business because that business also was democratized many years ago, far before real estate was democratized, right? When was the last time you used a travel agency?
A long time ago. In fact, I enjoy booking my own
Exactly.
trips, but yeah.
To be honest, I can't remember the last time I used it as well.
Yeah.
But their travel agency business is booming and thriving. So the question is, how come they're still around today when you and I haven't used
Prefer
one
to
in
book our
years?
flights our own, right? But perhaps their business model is such that they really maybe they give incentives, freebies, a trolley bag, But are real estate agents allowed? We are technically not agents not supposed to give
Of course not.
this kind of incentives.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's not about incentives, right?
Mm.
So we have to understand, when would I use a travel agency?
Perhaps when you're too busy, or you don't have that specific connections with the perhaps that specific destination, you don't have a connection with the suppliers
so
there.
there's a knowledge gap there, right?
Mm.
So time, knowledge gap, right? Certain locations in the world are very exotic. Information might not be as democratized as a mainstream destination. Right? So you see, these are really 2 points just to think about. I don't have to say so much about what we are doing at RHD, but I think this is our thought process. Right? You have to identify these pain points that are still going to be relevant to the customer down the road. Then we have to redefine how are we going to help mitigate these pain points. Rather than saying, I'm still here as a real estate agent, I'm here to help you and nothing. That's too high level, too high brow. And when you are such a generalist as well, your approach, there's no specialization, then it's going to be tougher, right? Because again, if you look at those 2 things we talk about, time and knowledge gap, right? So time, if somebody really wants to pay you just to help them because they don't have time to do something, that may not necessarily be warranting a very high commission rate. If I just need you to schedule some viewings on me, for instance, would I really pay you a lot of money for that? Not
Yeah, it doesn't
necessarily.
command a premium.
Yeah. In fact, to be honest, if AI starts coming in, AI can schedule everything for you as well. Just say, this is my requirements, I foresee this future already. You just talk to the AI and say, this is my requirements, I'm looking for something like that. Find me something and then, sieve me through a list. They'll present all the listings there. And you just tell the AI, okay, I'm going to shortlist this. I need you to schedule an appointment. I'm going to do a window between 11 to 1 p.m. on Saturday. Mr. AI, can you just... These are things you might laugh at, you might smile and say, no lah, nobody's going to. It's inevitable with artificial intelligence coming in. Right, so all this is chipping away what we currently do, and we still focus on that aspect of the business. The machine is much more productive than you in scheduling viewings. So the machine can do it. The machine is also 24/7 available, and probably quite a bit cheaper, especially if the business builds the infrastructure for it. To the customer, it's free. So if you're there today demanding, like, hey, use me, and I want you to pay me for this is what I do, you're going to have some challenges also, isn't it? Yeah. So that's why, not to share so much about what we're doing, but in terms of the way we're approaching how we are going to redefine and reposition what a relevant property agency or platform will be of the future. I think that's important for us to really look at, and I can tell you urgently at this time. If you're still sitting there and saying we want to do things the same way we've been doing things.
You'll be phased out.
Yeah.
Yeah, very quickly as well.
Again, not to present it all in doom and gloom, going back to the travel agency model, the agency model is still thriving today. What is the value proposition that they're presenting to the market that enables maybe still a large relative portion of the market share to go towards an agency, while people like you and I would say 90% of the time do not use an agency. But ultimately the customer wins because we don't have a choice. There might be a time coming where you might want to organize a big trip for a huge birthday milestone, or maybe for your whole family, extended family. You might want to engage somebody to help you.
Yeah, it's like a wedding planner.
Exactly. Right. So when does the need arise, then the solution is to ensure that it's able to help you to solve the problem.
So it's very specialist.
Correct. So this would be some of the approaches that we are looking at as well from the business. Yeah.
It has to be very dynamic. You have to think 2 steps ahead of the regulations and the industry forces that changes.
And ultimately, I think I also share with people at the end of the day, the traditional agency model has always focused very much on just engaging the agent. And I would say there's a slight neglect to ultimately the customer experience, right? Because your customer technically is the agent as an agency. Therefore, in a way, the customer experience, the client experience has been a little bit neglected, right? And also then you have a lot of subjectivity, because you might provide a certain infrastructure for the agent as a conduit to provide it, but not necessarily that the agent may want to use it. So whatever the customer is receiving at the end may not necessarily be the exact experience that you as a business wanted to present to the customer. Right, so there are a lot of these things that we have to look at as well if we really want to remain relevant, right? And more importantly, thrive in this new economy that's coming up. Yeah, so that's what we are really looking at Orange Team. Yeah, we're trying to find our new blue ocean. Yeah.
Very well said, right. Would you have any parting advice or anything else you'd like to add to the audience?
Well, maybe going back to the primary question of new RESs, right? So I think starting this business today, you have to realize that you are your own businessman. And people always ask me, hey, what is a good company to join and stuff like that. Having been working with very successful RESs and agents for almost 2 decades, I can tell you that mathematically or statistically, you can look at the success of an agent through a very simple formula, right? In terms of percentages of proportion or makeup. And many people ask what company, who to join and stuff like that. To be honest, I think the company and the upline constitution probably is less than 40 to 30% of your chance of your rate of success. The primary rate of success ultimately depends on you. The most successful agents, yes, they join the right company, they join the right upline or partner to work with. that helped them to gain that marginal edge. But the primary advantage still ultimately comes from you as a person.
Yourself,
Yeah, so I think it is important for people to realize that before talking about which is a good company or that, look at yourself first. I always say when you're starting this business, real estate, why you even invest in real estate, right? It's because of this term called leverage. You buy real estate, you invest in real estate because you get to buy something 4 times the multiple in Singapore of your seed capital. Today, if you have 250,000, you go to the stock market, you pretty much can buy 250. Maybe if you're lucky, you've got a good track record, your remisier or whatever might provide you some
leverage.
Yeah, but that's a bit dangerous also when you're playing
Risky
equities, right?
Yes.
Whereas for real estate, it's much
tangible.
Yes, and there's a stronger base of support, and you're able to leverage a lot more for that. So leverage is very important. Right? So again, going back to the question, if you want to be a successful RES and explore this business today, what are your strengths? What are your past experiences? Think about it from that leverage on that as a start. That's how you will use any advantage, that marginal advantage versus another person. So don't look at, oh, somebody's very good at social media, somebody's very good at flyers, somebody's very good at something else, and then you try to say, oh, let me go and do what they're doing. Find your own source of strength, then use that, tap into it and leverage on that to jump into the business. Like that's how I started. I knew London well. So when I started this business, where do I start? Obviously I didn't come to New Launch because I was never exposed to that when I was young. But using my experience and my interests, right, in architecture, I jumped into my very first sale, which was a land property. And that's how I presented the house. I said, you come in, you look at this. Do you know in this season or this era when you're building houses, the facade is quite ordinary, which is great because you can really reshape it without spending too much money to change and modernize the house with minimal costs. So that's the marginal advantage I presented, right, to my client when I was helping to sell the house. I said, I'm here to provide that new vision and that execution plan and that piece of comfort to the buyer, potential buyer who's buying your house today, to see that vision and know that it can materialize it. And that's what I'm selling them, the potential. If I'm just selling this typical brick and mortar today, I'm not going to be able to extract more value. I'm here to help you as a seller to extract more value. So this was me using my past experience and my passion to come into the business. And that was my leverage, which the seller was leveraging on me with that experience to help them to ascertain a better value of the house. So primarily, going back to the question again, if you are, say, an incoming RES and you're thinking of starting this business, don't look at company or that first, look at yourself first. What are your strengths? Where was your past experience? Where's your past network that you can perhaps also tap into leverage? Because you need to provide yourself that strong base support to launch yourself into this business. This business is tough, man. Costs are high, the rewards may not necessarily be there because it's a probability game, right? With 35,000 over RES in Singapore, you're just one of 35,000. How are you going to set yourself apart? You better make sure you have that leverage.
Strong differentiation,
Yeah.
Yes.
And the differentiation can only come from you finding that source of strength for you to leverage on, which is unique to you, that nobody else has.
Yes.
That story that you have for the last 10 years in whatever business you've been doing.
So well said.
Yeah, right. So I think ultimately is not just real estate, with anything in life. I always share people, if I can finish off here, successful people usually rely on two things. They find something that they are very passionate about, or they find something that they are very good at doing. Blessed are those that have found both.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So you try to look at these two things. These two things will provide you leverage.
Right.
Which is again the premise of why people invest in real estate, because of leverage. Same thing you can apply to your life. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Justin, for your valuable insights and your wisdom and your experience. We hope to have you in a future video to share more about other things related to the industry. Right, thank you guys for watching this video. We hope that you found value in it. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel for more upcoming videos.